Good evening and welcome to the April 7th, 2026 Nacogdoches regularly scheduled City Council meeting. Blaine, would you lead us in prayer, please?
Sure. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Lord, thank you for giving us a day that we've never seen before, one we'll never see again. Lord, I'm asking you for prayer for our country, for our state, for our city, and for our homes individually and collectively, that we may come to be as one. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. You'll stand for the pledges, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Okay, we have a proclamation. This is the proclamation of Parkinson's Awareness Month.
All of them. There may be other.
Is anybody else? People in the United States, and the prevalence will rise to 1.2 million by 2030. Whereas Parkinson's disease is the fastest growing neurodegenerative disease with 90,000 new people diagnosed each year in the United States. Whereas Parkinson's disease is the 13th leading cause of death in the United States according to the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention. Whereas it is estimated that the economic burden of Parkinson's disease is at least $52 billion annually, including direct and indirect costs such as treatment, Social Security payments, and lost income. Whereas the symptoms of Parkinson's disease vary from person to person and can include tremors, slowness of movement and rigidity, difficulty with balance, swallowing, chewing, and speaking, cognitive impairment and dementia, mood disorders, and a variety of other non-motor symptoms. Whereas the fastest growing subset of Parkinson's disease diagnosis is in people under the age of 50, known as young or early onset Parkinson's disease. Whereas research shows that a combination of genetic and environmental factors such as exposure to pesticides like paraquat and certain metals are tied to Parkinson's disease, but more research is needed to uncover the exact cause and progression of the disease. Whereas there is no objective test or biomarker for Parkinson's disease, and there is no cure or drug to slow or halt the progression of this disease. Whereas volunteers, researchers, care partners, and medical professionals are working to improve the quality of life for persons living with Parkinson's disease and their families. Whereas increased research, education, and community support services such as those provided by the Parkinson's Foundation and other organizations are needed to find more effective treatments, provide access to quality care to those living with the disease today, and advance efforts towards a cure. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that I, Randy Johnson, Mayor of the City of Nacogdoches, and on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim the month of April in 2026 as Parkinson's Month, as Parkinson's Awareness Month. There you go, Danella. We're going to take a picture.
In the middle, in front of the flyer. You'll have to put it this way.
Okay, next item is open forum. We have one applicant for open forum, Mr. Huckabee.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Many of you know that my dad, Tim Huckabee, passed away on March 21st, exactly 5 years to the day after his double lung transplant. Over the past few weeks, I've been reminded of what a special place the city of Nacogdoches and the broader East Texas community is. First, I want to express my gratitude to the many members of our council, staff, and community members that have been there to comfort my family and I through this time, whether that was through a text, phone call, mail, social media, flowers, a delivered meal, prayers, or your presence. We're thankful for you. To say that we're devastated by this loss would be an understatement. I'm not sure how well I can either summarize my dad's life or his impact in a 3-minute open forum, but I'll do my best. Tim Huckabee was born on June 1st, 1962 at Nacogdoches Memorial Hospital to Marion and Beth Huckabee and spent most of his childhood growing up in Alto while my grandfather was pastoring a church there. But he also spent a great deal of time at my great-grandparents' dairy farm just north of the Nacogdoches Airport. He graduated from Alto High School in 1980 and briefly enrolled in college before dropping out. On February 7, 1986, he suffered a gunshot wound to his left shoulder in an accident that should have taken his life. After long months in hospitals across 2 states, he rehabbed and began to find a new purpose in life without the use of his left arm. He was inspired to return to school and eventually graduated from Stephen F. Austin State University with a bachelor's degree in social work. After some time working for MHMR in Houston County, he came to work for the Burke Center in October of 1991, where he would remain as a licensed social worker and mental health clinician for the next 30 years until his health, following his transplant, no longer allowed him to work. Here are 2 anecdotes from his clients and colleagues that were shared with me over the past few weeks. Tim was the first person I talked to as a brand new Burke client 13 years ago, and he was so kind and patient with my 1,000 questions. He assured me that lots of people go through stuff, but we'll be all right if we keep being honest with the people who care about us. He never gave up on me, and he called out my BS. I remember when he was already at home working, how he helped me get my medicine filled when I was out of town and didn't plan well. He was such an amazing example of loving thy neighbor and Christ-like compassion. Thank you and your family for sharing him with us. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to tell him that I have fully recovered because of the resources and support from him and others on my care team. Another said, your father used to be my counselor at Burt. He helped me in so many ways. He was and still is a good man. From a supervisor, your dad knew his business and was a consummate professional. He shared his wisdom with all who were open to receiving. I was lucky to be able to work with him for so many years and enjoyed his friendship for all these years afterward. These stories tell of a quiet and humble man, deeply rooted in his faith in God, love for his family, and belief that we're only as strong as we are united, weak as we are divided. He instilled these traits in me, not just in his words, but his actions across my 33 years. He taught me the way that we treat people matters, that words spoken softly have the most powerful meaning and impact, that ego has no place in leadership, and that relationships really matter, that having the courage to stand up to injustice matters. I got a front row seat to leadership that made a difference. Tim Huckabee is my inspiration to be a better servant of our community that we both love deeply. I will continue to honor his life and memory through helping others with the traits mentioned above that flow through my veins and in my DNA. Let's get to work.
Thank you, Chad.
Thank you.
Okay, next item, item 5, items to be removed from the consent agenda.
I'd like to remove item 6C.
Anything else?
I make a motion that we approve the balance of the consent agenda.
Second.
Have a motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
I'll be down there in a minute.
Maybe more than what we have, I don't know.
I'll be down, I'll be down there in a minute.
If you need the tech help, I'm here.
I'll be down there in a minute, to help y'all.
Council, Case Opperman, Director of Public Works, City Engineer, happy to answer.
Okay, I asked, I actually warned Case I was going to be asking him this, but if you would give us just a little background to what this is, because I know we've been working on it for a few years, and I think it's helpful for us all to get a perspective of where we've been and where we're heading with this. So thank you, Case.
So as you see before you here, we've got our Bonita and Lanana Creek Sewer Replacement Project general areas. These are our existing trunk mains, if you can see that on your screen. Yellow being the Lanana Creek Sewer Trunk Main, and red being the Bonita Sewer Trunk Main, which ties into Lanana around the softball fields just south of downtown here. We've had this on our radar for quite some time as needed replacements for these. These are our largest trunk mains in town. And what I mean by trunk main is these are the main collectors for all the sewer lines in town, which then transports our sanitary sewer down to our wastewater treatment plant south of town on Rayburn Drive. And so these are major undertakings. A lot of budgeting has gone into this. These are actually going to be hopefully largely funded by our revenue bonds, which we did last year. And so, and again, we'll look for opportunities to offset some of this budget with grants if they come available. But as of right now, these are in the CIP under our utility fund. And so the current item before you is a surveying services request for qualifications that we did over the past month or so. This is one in a series of procurements we're going to do for this project. We've also received submissions for qualifications on environmental services as well, which we're still in the scoring phase of. But it'll be followed in the coming months by an engineering services contract as well. So the surveying and environmental is needed to come before the engineering, because without it, there's nothing the engineers can do design-wise without the topographic surveys and boundary surveys and things like that. So this is kind of the first step to getting these projects designed and implemented and ultimately constructed. So we did receive, how many did we receive? I think we received 5, if I've got, 5 submissions several weeks ago from surveyors all over the place. Some here locally, and then some as far away as, the Metroplex areas of Dallas. But we scored them based on criteria such as the firm experience with similar projects, competencies, workload capacity, things like that. One component of this project is we're going to require the surveying firms to utilize LiDAR drone imagery, which is short for light detection and ranging. And so that's a very high density point cloud that's shot on the ground for topographic surveying. You don't have to understand what that means. I barely understand it. But basically it's very high quality survey, ground survey data. So it'll be very useful when the designers are actually laying these lines out. And so we again received 5 submissions. The highest scoring of our submissions was by 215 Consulting as the prime firm. They are actually going to be teaming with 2 sub-consultants that are also local to Nacogdoches, NT Sampson and Associates and Glenn Hoffpower Surveying. All of these surveyors have done decades of work in this town. And so we're very pleased that they had the submission that our scoring team, and I should say that these submissions were scored independently by 4 or 5 team members across departments in the city. So these were independent. These were not, it was not a collaboration amongst staff members. It was independently scored and tallied. So If you've got your scoring in front of you, out of 400 total points, 215 kind of rose to the top. They were very competitive submissions, but 215 was found to be the highest scoring. So staff is very pleased with this. We do a lot of work with 215 and these other companies here in town, so we're very confident in their abilities to perform these services for us. I should note this is, as you see on the bottom of your screen there, our timeline is not months, it's years on this. So there's hopefully by the image you have before you, you see what the depth of this effort's gonna be. And so it's gonna take a while, but it's ultimately gonna be able to be handed over to our designers. And they will feed our designers when we get to that point along the way. It's not, we're not going to wait 2 years or more before the engineers start working. It'll be, as they lay out a certain section of this survey, they'll be able to feed that information to the designers, and they'll be able to work simultaneously. But the full survey effort, which includes easement surveying and acquisition and things like that, will be on the timeline of a couple of years. So I'm happy to answer any further questions that council may have.
So could you just say a little bit about the breakages we've had in those lines and the threat it poses to the city?
We have, as I said, these lines are named after these creeks because they're right alongside these creeks. And so these are large mains. A lot of them are made out of materials that we would not probably recommend anymore. Concrete being the main one that we've had issues with. Sewer gas does not really jive very well with concrete, as we've come to find out since these lines were built decades ago. A lot of these areas, it eats through the concrete, it eats it through the steel reinforcement, and these things essentially just fall apart. So we've had issues where these creeks have meandered in such a way that they've exposed these pipes, and the weight of the pipe has actually collapsed into the creek in certain areas, which we've had to do remediation on, report to the state, go through all these efforts. So the goal of replacing these lines is not only to replace them, but to move them further away from these creeks where we can as well. So I can't remember exactly what your question was now. I've been rambling too long.
No.
Did I answer it?
You did. You'd answer it. I think it's great to have some perspective on what we're doing.
Oh, your question was about breaks. Yes, we have. We've had several on each of these trunk mains in the past, over the past decade or so.
So, thank you for. I don't know if anybody else has any, but you've answered all mine.
Okay.
I've got one question. How did you decide to color Lenana the same as a banana?
Oh, gee.
Well, I can honestly say that was the discretion of our GIS department.
Okay.
So maybe they're just intuitive that way.
So these right-of-ways are gonna be larger because of the meandering of the creeks?
Well, we're gonna relocate them further away. We're on this survey. We're gonna have them do basically a swath of 100 feet or so on each side of each creek. So it's gonna give a lot of information on areas where we can move these in a better location where needed. There are certain areas of say for example the northern section of the Lenana line is actually kind of far away from the creek already, but there are definitely areas in the south of it that are getting too close. So we'll have to look at where to strategically move those.
Is it going through anybody's yard or house?
Not house, no.
Well, 100 feet,
Well,
these houses are pretty close to the creek.
some of them are, and
sometimes.
that's a lot of what this design effort's gonna be, is figuring out where these things can go. We certainly don't wanna affect anybody's property in a negative way.
Unless you want it closer, Brad.
Hush, okay? Just,
Run it down Mound Street if you want us to.
I like that hush. I think that's well said.
thank you,
But,
thank you. Just trying to calm him down.
so what, yes, sir. We'll do a lot of thinking about that as time goes on, just to get it in the right place. There might even be areas, I can't speak to this. I don't know, but potentially move it on the other side of the creek in some areas. So
okay.
it just depends on what the survey data shows, and then what works and what makes sense.
It's a monumental job, isn't it?
It's a big undertaking. So
Okay.
But big picture, in seriousness, you're trying to relocate so we'll have less washout as well, affecting it long term, which that's one of the design considerations that has had to be factored in on this.
even material, I mean, this gets so in depth that it's material even is going to be a highly considered aspect of it. We think, oh, just put a pipe in the ground. Well, we want to build this to last another 100 years.
Yep.
If we can. So at least until I'm done. But so decades is what we're looking at here. So what is that pipe material that's going to last that long at that size? Because these are going to be big lines. So
What is that pipe material?
we don't know yet.
Oh,
I'm going to count on my designers to figure that out. But it could be generally, not to utilize all the time here, but PVC is what we generally go back with now for sewer lines, but we don't have a 50-year history on PVC, almost 50. But we don't have a 100-year history on PVC, so we don't, we think it's great. It is, but we don't have a 100-year history. We do have a 100-year history on some older types of material like clay, but we don't generally put clay in the ground anymore. So
Yeah.
it's all a discussion, trying to figure out what the right answer is.
Okay, any other questions?
No, but I'll make the motion, if you'd like it, that we approve the selection of 215 Consulting for this work as outlined in item 6C.
Second. We have a motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Okay.
Thank
on
you,
to-
Case.
To the regular agenda. Item 7A, consider approval of a memorandum of understanding between the City of Nacogdoches and the Texas Department of Transportation for the Transportation Alternative Set-Aside Program project related to enhancing bicycle and pedestrian mobility along North Street, and authorize the city manager to execute any and all necessary documents. Mr. New.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Mike New, Executive Director of Development and Infrastructure. Tonight's item is typically not presented to council. A memorandum of understanding can be executed often by a city manager, but you as a council authorize the city manager to execute such documents as well. This project has a little bit of history. We've gone through a couple of iterations with the council on receiving authorization from you to even apply for this grant award that we're now beginning the process of executing. So back in January of 2025, TxDOT announced this call for projects for Transportation Alternative Set-Aside Program. It's a recurring program, federally funded, and then basically implemented through organizations, bureaucracies like TxDOT. The purpose of this program is to enhance and implement active and alternative transportation projects that emphasize bicycle and pedestrian mobility primarily. We found an interest in this particular call for projects because, like many projects around the city, we are partnering with TxDOT in just about everything we can, trying to leverage their capabilities and their funding to improve areas where we know there are intersections with our local streets and lots of mobility. We know North Street is a very congested area. It's our primary street that runs right through the middle of town. We've talked many times about how we can integrate improvements in partnership with SFA, in partnership with our local businesses that front North Street. Most of them do. And then work through what we know are some obstacles with North Street improvements, the lack of right-of-way, the width. It's such an old corridor for the city. Many of our commercial entities and even the campus itself comes very close. I know maybe you've got a local business that runs right up on that line with traffic. So how do you work around that? How do you work through that?
Tear it down. No, sorry. Okay.
But it's something that has preceded me in my arrival here, but certainly is a challenge that we continually talk about and want to work through in order to improve not only how to get traffic through and around Nacogdoches, but improve the look of it, right? Improve our gateway through our community. Okay, so we decided to apply, and council authorized the city to apply for what we call the North Street Active Transportation Plan. Essentially, we wanted to take the corridor beginning at where some of our North Street begins at Pillar Street, the entrance to our downtown area, and going all the way up through campus frontage and ending at what we would consider a primary stretch at Austin Street at that intersection. What are some of the many areas within that particular zone that we can identify and maybe even highlight bicycle and pedestrian improvements? It's more than sidewalks. It's a consideration of potentially bike lanes, changes in access, different access management opportunities from businesses. It's a long conversation. There could be many options here to maximize what this plan intends to improve, but it takes on many shapes and forms depending on what community receives funding of this type. But this particular project does focus primarily on that Pillar to Austin Street area, and north and southbound, both sides of the road, what pedestrian and bicycle mobility improvements might look like. We don't know that yet. We're still in the very early stages. This is simply to engage TxDOT, not on a contract, which if this were a traditional grant award, we would establish a contract with TxDOT. This is an MOU because what TxDOT has offered to do here is essentially assume responsibility for the entire project. We are in consultation with them throughout, but because we are eligible for transportation development credits, that is a federal credit opportunity. It allows us to basically not provide any local match. So not only do we benefit by not committing any hard dollars, any of our general fund dollars or other dollars to this project, TxDOT will assume responsibility, carry things forward, and bring us along essentially for the ride. TxDOT did express with us that there is an interest in having us take the lead on any public engagement opportunities. We are happy to do that. So I don't have a hard timeline. We haven't gotten to that point in our discussions and our engagement with TxDOT. All this does is set the tone for how we will engage TxDOT and under what parameters we do that. You can see some of those details within the MOU itself, and your action tonight will simply be to allow the city manager to execute that document. Happy to answer any questions.
So I was in Denton recently, and they have bollards or whatever they're called to make a bike lane. You know what I'm talking about, those stanchions that go through. Is that what they're talking about on North Street?
Well, let me throw myself in front of the bus here. So we're beginning a planning process. It's TxDOT's right of way. Obviously, it's serving our local businesses. We're about to have potentially SFA double in student population over the long haul. We also have contiguous driveways throughout. We have University as a parallel corridor. We also have Pearl Street. What this will do effectively will kick off the planning process on a host of options. TxDOT would be looking at the current traffic volumes, future traffic volumes. They will likely have to model the turning movements and then offer probably a host of options. There may not be a great way to move through that segment at, let's say, a high speed. If anything, there will be more pedestrian activity regardless through there. So they're going to try to look at that nexus between the pedestrian piece or the alternative piece. So when Mike says it may even be a dual use, let's say, off-street facility. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it defaults to a bike lane only. They will have to make some recommendations on throughput of passenger traffic and cars, how much of, and they'll have to do, there's some interpolating, if I may use that term, that will come in with that, looking at the proximity of student housing, some of the things in the master plan. This is also good timing also with our comprehensive plan, if that's a separate item. But what they will be doing is probably providing us, because they'll be taking the lead on their right-of-way, and those are the important things. We need their buy-in for anything to happen there. Now, if you look at the folks that we were in the list of commission-approved projects, others that had received planning funds previously, they actually were getting, 5 million, 10 million for actual capital improvements. What form this will take, we'll have to wait and see. I suspect they may throw out some options that are going to be more urban options, especially in the proximity of the school.
What does that mean, urban options?
Well, what it simply means is you can only fit so much stuff you can only fit so much in a 5-pound sack. Nice way I can put it. So they'll have to look at how many cars can you move through there? Can you channelize some of the turning movements? Can you accommodate more pedestrians? Because again, if you've got continuous flow, if you have versus platooning of traffic, all of those things are going to have to be factored in. Within a given right-of-way, without taking more right-of-way and wiping out businesses, you only have so many options. So my gut is, having worked on various corridor projects, they may have to look at some options that would include maybe slowing traffic, maybe continuous flow of traffic through some areas, and then maybe even some pedestrian type amenities to make it a shorter span to cross the street. Probably some things that would also be a little bit more user-friendly for bicycles and pedestrians, especially if you have coming and going to the campus. I don't think we can assume that with the current campus plans that the do nothing is a good alternative for North Street. It might not be a good alternative for Star or for University by the time we're done. They're going to have to look at this big picture in terms of volume. They'll make some recommendations. I'm sure people that want things to, okay, in 1985, it worked like this. That may be the case, but that also might have been when they had 12,000 students or whatever their peak was in the late 80s, but it might not work with 18. And so we will be working with them on soliciting input for a host of options, both back of curb or in the street. But that's why y'all get the big bucks on some of the decision making too. They'll look at community input. They'll look at y'all's input. But I can also tell you, having worked with TxDOT in other communities, not just in the Hill Country, but in the Gulf Coast, if you tell them the options of, okay, I don't like any of the above, go away. Be careful what you wish for. Sometimes they will go away, and they'll just leave you with what it is. Again, at the end of the day, it's got to be something that's palatable, that functions. I think we need to go into it with an open mind. I think their intent is to make the functionality and the safety of it better. But again, when the volumes go up and you don't have any capability of channelizing turn movements or getting people across the street, you can expect an uptick, and Scott will tell you, you can expect an uptick on accidents, on pedestrian accidents, on T-bones. There's only so many things you can do, and we're going to work with them to look at the alternatives. And when I say urban, I mean in a section, something that might be closer speed to what it is downtown. You might have no other way of getting through there if you double the student population over the next decade. We'll also need to be looking at, where SFA is placing future garages, where they anticipate tearing down dorms and moving things. It's all got to go into what's known typically as a synchro model. And it's going to be kind of garbage in, garbage out, and then they'll probably propose some best practices from AASHTO, the engineering standards, on what your options are.
The development of this plan will not be in a vacuum. SFA will certainly have a stakeholder role. Our broad community will have a stakeholder role in engagement opportunities. This won't be the last time you as a council hear from us regarding this plan. Different benchmarks throughout the development. We'll be bringing some things to you and asking for your feedback as a body as well. To answer your question directly, Councilmember, anything's on the table at this point. The goal, I know for TxDOT and with the city's partnership, is to gather as much data as we can, not only the vehicle traffic data, pedestrian traffic data, incorporate the SFA master plan, incorporate the city's long-term plans, and start working through some of those options, presenting those, vetting them, determining there may be several good options. There may be several bad options that we have to consider. Bad in terms of how it's prioritizing traffic through our main corridor. So anything is potentially on the table, but this is going to be a multi-dimensional plan. So any one solution is just, it'll be more than that.
And let me throw this out. Having seen stuff in the Dallas area, which I never use as a good example, or a lot of stuff in the Austin area, same thing. I wouldn't use those as great examples. There's some European examples that are great. And that some of those things y'all would probably look at and go, that doesn't make any sense. What may not make any sense is the scenario where you have either bulbs or bollards in the wrong place and a bunch of pavement that's not utilized and has one bike in it. And I understand what your concern is on that. But what it might make sense is to create a larger pathway, have fewer lanes in a section, and actually basically, I hate to use the term double wide, but a double wide sidewalk that can accommodate both pedestrian and bicycles, that's behind the curb, that also has possibly, maybe they're not bollards, or maybe it's like Galveston where you do have the lighted bollards on the edge of the curb that also provide some physical barrier and lighting and other aesthetics.
Wouldn't it make more sense to work on Pearl and University as alternate routes instead of this? Because
Well-
I know people threw an enormous fit recently over the removal of a red light there at Cadence Bank and North Street.
Well, that was just Ron Collins.
Yeah,
But
you know, I mean, you do have to consider the business people there and
That's
the
right.
people of this town, and already North Street is,
Well-
pretty congested.
That is exactly what we're saying, though, is that
Are you trying to move the traffic off of North Street?
I think I wouldn't look at it that way. What I would say is if you have destination traffic on North Street, if you have destination traffic to those businesses, if you're mixing it with other traffic that might be better on University, you probably want those taking University. If you want to get folks to the cash register, if you want to get them back and forth across so there's a net benefit for those restaurants that are on the other side of the street, getting students to and from, you might not be able to leave as wide of a cross section for those kids to run across safely. And that is where, and believe me, I would, having run transit, having done urban redevelopment, but also having done suburban development, I'm not suggesting that we take, and I don't think TxDOT will be either. We're not just going to take some random tool and suggest it be applied on the wrong job. But I think there may be some concepts that it would be good to have an open mind on that functionally. So level of service, let's just look at that. That's where the synchro model and things like that come in. That's when you're looking at incidents and traffic deaths or pedestrian accidents all factor in. And I think that approach, I'd say go through the analysis, let the considerations occur, let the data drive some of this, or a lot of it, and then also let them try to show us three-dimensionally what some of these things would look like and how they might function. And once you start looking at the level of service, so the engineers, they love doing this, ranking things, A to F. You probably will get to a level of service F at some point anyway, if you do nothing. You might be able to raise it to a C, but you might be able to reduce incidents, reduce deaths, reduce speeding, all of the above. And so that would be my recommendation on this. I don't think we need to come to I'm sure I've never had a social media account, thank the Lord. I'm sure someone will be on social media just because I'm saying this. I think everyone needs to have an open mind and let the data drive it and then what some potential options are before anyone comes to any conclusions.
Let me say this. All we're doing is considering an approval of a memorandum of understanding between the city of Nacogdoches and the Texas Department of Transportation for alternative set-aside program project, period. We're not building anything tonight. We are just giving them the authority to get the process started. We're not into design, we're not into anything. We're just asking them, this council, to give them the authority to start something. And there's gonna be a lot of conversation, but nothing's gonna be decided tonight but what's on this agenda.
I still have some questions.
Sure.
And if I could just make one more thing, is that, well, we got to be open about this, because when you support it, and I'm not saying I'm not supporting it, but when you do support it, then people come back and say, well, you voted for this, why are you against it now? Well, we didn't know what we were just along for the ride. I don't know what along for the ride means, and I think we need to be very careful about this.
Sure. And
And
I
I
think
don't want it thrown back in my face that I voted for something that I didn't know what I was doing.
Well,
and I think the Lloyd Street signal is a good example of where
And what are
we
we
want to
gonna,
maximize our engagement with TxDOT during this process.
and what
they
are we
intend
gonna
to do
get
that.
for $173,000?
Well, what you're going to get for $173,000 is a lot more brought to the table for the roadway side and the access management piece, because that is the back of curb piece. We'll have a final tally. They're actually going to bring more money to the table. This is exactly why we're doing this MOU.
Okay, because we can't even put a roof on this place for
No, this is-
$173,000.
No, this
So
is
it's just a plan.
This is planning work, and they are bringing other state planning resources because it's their road. So let's be real clear. That's not our right of way. That's not our street. We have no maintenance on it. But I can tell you this, whether we like it or not, and yes, we've had a lot of back and forth about the Lloyd Street signal. But if you double the size of the campus population, at least, I'm not saying they're all sleeping there, but let's say they're all there at one time, that facility and the other facilities in proximity will not function the same way. So that's why they're doing it. They saw this as an opportunity for us to partner and work with the community and start having some of these discussions. Again, it may come back that they leave it alone. It may come back, but my guess is the do nothing is probably not going to get you past a pretty tough level of service. So
We've done that for the last 50, 60 years.
I would say this. You could say I was I was for it before I was against it, but I won't make that. I'm not in politics.
Depends
so.
on what is.
So I'm going to follow up on, Brad, I hadn't been thinking about this, but I really appreciate your comment about that. Sometimes I think we get into a process and there's so much planning that we end up with a package and then we're kind of caught. And one of the things that even concerns me is even related to enhancing bicycle and pedestrian mobility along North Street. So one of my questions is, do we want to increase bicycle activity on North Street, or do we want to put it in a different place? Does this tie us into putting bicycles on North Street?
No.
Can I say something?
Let them ask my
No,
question.
I'm going to answer. I think I can. I'm smart enough to answer that. I mean, we're not going to do anything. That's what TxDOT's job's for.
Then why are we doing
Dot,
it?
huh?
Why are we
We're
doing it?
giving them the authority to start the dialogue with them to come up with a plan if there is a plan. That's all we're doing, Brad. I don't know why this is a big deal.
So
This
let me,
sure,
Plans.
and I'll just
We've talked about
remind the
sewage
council.
pipes and this tonight.
This
And
MOU came about, this item tonight came about because the city initiated an application for grant funding, not anticipating
I'm not
TxDOT.
I'm not
Yeah,
questioning the
absolutely.
MOU at all, or even TxDOT funding. I'm just,
The
I'm
positive,
just asking.
one positive aspect of this is that this level of engagement in this particular planning process with TxDOT gives us the ability to provide feedback in a way that we really haven't before in many TxDOT projects.
Okay.
We're notified, there's community input that TxDOT oversees, but the city's role in that is a bit distant. This is a much more engaged process.
And again, this is
That's
planning,
good.
this is the planning process, and subsequent phases of improvements, we would need to work in conjunction with TxDOT to request those funds from the commission. So again, they would likely would not pursue any funding for anything that wasn't locally supported in that corridor.
Right, right.
That's, I don't know how else to say it, because if you go back to those entities that were listed on the award from the commission, the minute order that this one was listed in, they requested capital funds, even on TxDOT corridors in some cases, through their towns for the exact same things. But that was, again, that's us going back, working with TxDOT, and then asking for money for specific improvements. So they want our community input. That is
Right.
what we're trying to do.
So let me ask my question again, because I'm not sure I got an answer. So the wording is that the MOU is to enhance bicycle and pedestrian mobility along North Street. And so one of my questions, in fact, several people have brought this to my attention, but also I've done some research on it, that the dangers of having bicycle included with cars and pedestrians,
Well-
that there may be another alternative to bicycles in like perhaps another road. And does this, because of this wording, does this,
I would not get into that depth of legalese on a planning MOU. And the
okay,
reason I'll say this, I'd probably have hair if I went back through all of the pedestrian transit master plans I've worked on: Uptown Houston, Upper Kirby, Midtown, Greater Southeast Management District, Greater East End, every one of those, Galveston, League City. I could keep going on. This is just so you can look at the host of larger options
okay,
and then whittle down, not a one-size-fits-all. It may be that you cannot fit a multi-use pathway. It may be that you can fit a multi-use pathway on one side of the road, but you can't on the other.
right, good
It
point.
may be that they recommend striping down Pearl, which is not their facility. It may be that it recommends something else adjacent to University.
Right, right,
I think they will have to use a computer
okay,
model on some of these numbers. It may not be justified at all that the usage is high enough, and they come back and say, bikes are really internal to the campus. They just need to come up to the periphery or cross the street.
okay.
And-
I definitely appreciate you all looking for outside funding, all the planning grants, and then followed by, the substantial dollars that they'll bring to it. So
One thing I'll
it's very helpful.
make note of with the council, what you see on your screen here is an inventory of other active transportation plans. Many of them are labeled bicycle and pedestrian master plans. Some of them are integrated within comprehensive plans. Some of them are county area government master transportation plans, regional plans. They take on a lot of different shapes and forms. Nothing about the development of a North Street active transportation plan guarantees that anything is or isn't built.
Right.
What it does do is give us data to assess. And we're gonna leverage TxDOT's resources to do that, to make decisions. What we hope is that if a plan is developed and recommendations are made, we can look at ways to integrate things that we feel are justified and prioritized into the streets that we manage, into Pearl Street, into those intersection and connections that
Good point.
we have responsibility for and we would be funding sometime into the
By an
future.
engineer, right, usually.
Correct. Engineering firms will be a part of this plan development.
Oh, does it have to be an Aggie? Okay.
Yes.
So I'm happy to make the motion if is any?
I just want to make one final statement.
Yes.
Our job is to ask questions. It's not to get spanked just because we ask a question that's uncomfortable. And I appreciate you guys answering the questions I have.
Well, if you think that was a spanking, you
No,
ain't
no,
never
hold
had
on,
one.
hold on.
No, go on. Go on with
No,
it.
I'll say this. If y'all get other questions throughout this process, please redirect it. Have folks send emails to us so we can even work with our TxDOT team on this.
But also work with us, like I know you had talked about other pictures of this, and I don't know what those pictures
No, no, there
are,
won't be
and-
pictures until they.
No, I mean, I know
Yes.
you all have looked at some things and drawings and,
No, those
saying
will
no,
come
you're
out of
saying-
those will come out of the planning process.
in December, we talked about that there are
There will be.
Two parts. One, what I'm showing
ahead.
you in this slide is examples of other plans that have been developed leveraging
right.
similar funds.
Uh-huh.
Ours will obviously look different, but as we progress in development of the plan and different stages in engagement, you'll be seeing visuals. You'll be seeing specific options that we're vetting. You'll be seeing things that we've considered but then dismissed because of
Right.
engineering reasons or because of community prioritization. So anything's on the table at this point. We haven't even started the process, but if we can engage with TxDOT via this MOU, we'll begin. Now, I don't have a timeline. We haven't even gotten that far in the discussion with TxDOT, but we'll be developing those things and informing council and the public along the way.
Okay. And so just for clarification, because in December I asked about this, and I think you said you had been looking at some possible pictures and things.
No.
No.
All we have.
That's what you
Well,
actually-
let me clarify.
Okay, thank you.
All we had discussed with TxDOT is if we, of course, he's got some examples of others
Right.
after we execute an MOU, and it's going to take time, months, not weeks, not days. After looking at data, after probably even some early rounds of discussions, probably with the public, then coming back with some potential options. They will have to take, again, think of it this way. They're going to have to take existing volumes. They're going to have to drop in the growth at SFA and where it's going to occur and what type of things are going to come at certain parts of the campus. Then they will be looking at what those volume impacts will be on North Street, and then they will be working on some potential options, if any, in that cross section on how you can handle that. We don't know if they're going to come back and say you need to add 3 signals or take all the signals out. If they're going to say you need to wipe out all the pedestrian stuff on one side and put a big sidewalk on the other, or if they're going to come back and say wipe out a lane on each side. I couldn't tell you. That's why I'm not an engineer. But they're going to go through a process that's going to involve the data, driving the options, and then they're probably going to come back, typically, having worked on corridor studies with TxDOT before, with more than one option, if there is more than one option, or they'll come back in some cases and they'll say, okay, you can do this or you can leave it alone because there's only room to do this or that. And then what say you? That's just kind of how these processes flow. But no one has developed any cross sections yet. We're just in the paperwork stage.
And we're happy to answer any question you have, because what we want to do, especially as we bring these to you, even in this early of a stage, we want to address preconceived notions about what we're doing. We want to address any perceptions about what this is or isn't, because it's not much of anything at this point. But when it begins to develop, it's going to be multifaceted. It's going to have a lot of elements to it. And we can kind of get lost in that if we're not clear about what we're doing. So we'll try to be transparent along the way. Well, we will be transparent along the way. And there'll be a lot of things for council to discuss, because if we can develop a plan that this council and the city is happy with, and TxDOT's bringing it forward, there are future opportunities for more state funding to support those improvements, other integrations to the streets and the corridors, arterials, and collectors that we manage. And then that begins to grow out into the other parts of the city that we really want it to be. But the core is North Street right now, because that's where all of our traffic is.
Yeah.
That's where SFA is fronting. It's where downtown is fronting. How do we connect those two gateways? How do we connect the gateways and bring that in from the outside of our community and make it work?
And the last thing I'll say is we started with the downtown plan, and then we're moving to the North Street corridor. And this is also for the bicycle pedestrian advocates and those out there. Most of our facilities are TxDOT. Almost universally, you cannot justify the capital expenditure on something in the hinterlands that doesn't have high density. We're talking about the density of jobs, downtown, and activities, and then we're now moving to North Street. Those areas are your lowest hanging fruit. If you can't do it there, you can't do it other places. Make that real clear. You can't, especially with the construction costs today, you can't just run a sidewalk in one of your most suburban parts of town, in any town, without having trip generators in proximity all along that. It's no different than transit. And so we logically moved from downtown, wrapped up that plan, are working on phases of that plan for implementation right now. Y'all are aware of some of those, including the garage. And then now moving to the North Street corridor, with the goal being, if we can identify some good capital projects, get them in line for funding.
So I have a couple questions, and I'll be brief. First question, to bring us back, we've had about 30-ish minutes of discussion. This MOU deals with a grant that we've already been awarded. Is that correct?
Yes, and I'll clarify that. With this MOU establishes that TxDOT essentially captures that money. We don't see it. We don't use it. It's their money. We are part of their project.
But it was something that we were previously awarded.
Correct.
We're just giving them control over it.
Correct.
The part that we would have had to pay for out of local funds is now going to be covered by TxDOT.
Correct.
Correct.
Or
Okay.
the credits that we're eligible for.
Or the credits that we're eligible for, they will handle that. And this starts the planning process for us to see what the options are as it relates to transportation along the North Street corridor.
Bounded by Pillar and Austin, yes.
Seems pretty straightforward in that we could have asked those questions before the council meeting. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
Sure.
So I really appreciate the
I think
clarification.
I was talking.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize you. Go ahead.
Okay. I thank you all for the work you've put in and for the things that you've explained to us tonight. I don't think it's going to take a whole lot of education to understand what you've said. It was pretty much straightforward. We are where we are because of not doing anything thus far. And if we keep doing the same thing we've been doing, we're going to keep on what? Getting the same thing. And so with all these questions that I've heard asked, with all of this, what I call filibustering that's been going on, it's just, it's a waste of time when you sit down and think about what we could have talked about before we got to this meeting. So from now on, let's try and get these things out before we get here so that we don't hold up the meetings in such a way. I appreciate you.
We need a motion. Everybody's through.
Make a motion that we approve the MOU as presented.
Second.
Have a motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
4 for, 1 against. Okay, next item on the agenda. Thank you, Mike. Next item, 7B, receive a presentation of capital improvement program funding. Todd,
Thank
Good
you,
luck.
Mayor, Council. Todd Semino, Interim Director of Finance.
good luck.
So tonight, I was asked to talk about the capital improvement program and basically how it's funded. We didn't really plan on getting into project-specific details or status because we plan on having another workshop on the capital improvement program on May 12th. So let me first just start out, maybe for the benefit of the viewing public. A capital improvement program is basically a 5-year forward-looking plan on how the city can maintain and improve its infrastructure. So that focuses on real properties such as land, streets, buildings, landfills, parks, drainage systems, water and sewer systems. What the capital improvement program doesn't focus on are personal property capital items such as police vehicles, fire engines, working vehicles, dump trucks, bulldozers, and other machinery and equipment. Those items are funded elsewhere in the budget. So this slide here basically talks about the different funds that the city uses to support its capital improvement program. So that's just a summary of the funds and the dollar amounts that were allocated in the fiscal year 2026 budget. So I will walk over each one of those funds and how the programs in each fund is funded. First is the general fund. You can see for FY26, the council had already approved over $1 million of projects in the general fund. Any CIP project that's in the general fund is basically funded through the reserves of that fund, which are derived from property taxes, sales taxes, just the general revenues of that fund. The bond fund, as y'all know, the voters approved the general obligation bond of over $40 million in 2023. And so we set up bond funds for each of those propositions. I think there were 7 different propositions. The next slide basically has a good breakout of those 7 different propositions. So you can see all of this is basically funded through a property tax increase. And all of that is funded through the debt service fund for the payment of the principal and interest related to the funds that we borrowed for each of these propositions. And you can see tranche 1 and tranche 2 were already issued. We've already received those funds. And you can see the effect that it had on the interest and sinking property tax rate, which is the debt service rate. It added 4.6 cents in 2024 and then 2.6 cents in 2025. The reason why the rate decreased in the second tranche was because interest rates decreased, and we borrowed a lower amount of principal, and then also the assessed values from the CAD came in higher. We'll probably have a better idea in the May meeting on when we will need to issue the balance that you can see, the $14.7 million. Honestly, I don't know if it's going to come in one tranche or 2 separate tranches. And the reason is because it's harder to spend that airport money. You can see we got over $5.2 million of airport money that we still need to issue. And I know the council tied that to matches also for grants. So we'll try to have some more clarity on how much money we'll need from the balance and when those issues will occur. But right now, we don't have that information available for you just yet. The Airport Construction Fund is another fund that supports our CIP, our program. You can see there's only a small amount budgeted in 2026, and that's basically a matching grant. You can see the type of project types that are funded through that fund as well.
And one thing to throw out on this one is we are in some discussions with, on the foundation side, on potential match of quote-unquote grants for some additional improvements, including a parking apron. So looking at the timing, we would look at the timing of that potentially. I believe y'all are in design, some theoretical design, Colin and Mike and Case shop. So we would at least have something to say grace over if we went to another sale of bonds, or I mean of the next tranche, really to activate them, because we do have the window, limited window in terms of use it or lose it. And we also are trying to be cognizant of the total property tax rate, even with the voter authorized approval of the 43 million. when that gets triggered and how that factors into the big picture.
Right, and going back on the on that, since he just mentioned it, obviously the voters approved almost $44 million. The reason why we do this in tranches is because if you issued the whole $43 million at once, that would have been a 15-cent approximate increase in the tax rate. And who wants a 15-cent increase in 1 year? Nobody. Also, we have basically 3 years to try to spend the majority of this money before we get into an arbitrage situation with the IRS. So we want to make sure we're prudent with the tax rate and that we can actually spend this money timely so we don't get into arbitrage issues with the IRS. So that's why we break up the tranches instead of doing an issue all at once. Okay, the hotel tax fund, there's $250,000 budgeted in FY 2026, and basically that's being funded through the hot tax. Just a little more information on that. So as y'all may know, so the hotel motel taxes that the city receives, we give 72.5% of that to the CVB for their operations. And then we also give $95,000 to the county for the county expo to help support their tourism through that facility. And then the rest that's left over is kept by the city in reserves for capital improvement programs or heads and beds use of the hot tax money. Okay, the special grant fund, as it implies, when we get grants or donations for particular projects, they go into this fund here. So none of that's funded through reserves or revenues of the city or property taxes. It's basically all just as it says there. It's funded by grants or donations. The street maintenance fund, as you know, the city has an ordinance on street user fees. So that's where we get that money from. You can see there's no money allocated in 2026. And the reason is we get about $750,000 a year on this street maintenance fund, but nothing was basically budgeted in 2026 because we have $10 million of bond proceeds that we're using to spend on our streets. So we're banking that money currently, but it will be used for the intended purpose of that ordinance. The utility fund, as y'all know, this is the water and sewer. And as y'all also know, we finally completed a very lengthy rate study, and it included the 5-year capital plan. As y'all know, the water and sewer has a 5-year capital plan of over $100 million. And so we had to figure out how to fund that. And it's basically funded 60-40, 60% through revenue bonds. So only the users of the system will pay basically the principal and interest on the $30 million of those revenue bonds. And then the other 40%, thankfully the city was prudent enough in the past and current to set money aside each year for this type of purpose. So again, 60% of this is funded through revenue bonds, 40% is through cash reserves, savings of the system. We've already issued one tranche in July of 2025 for $30 million, and maybe when we come to y'all in May, we'll have a better idea of when we need to issue that second tranche of the second $30 million. The sanitation fund, that's the landfill, garbage. We also did a rate study for that service also, and implemented rate increases to support that, basically just through user fees of that fund. That whole $6.6 million is pretty much all landfill, maybe some other small projects on the side. And again, we can get into the details and statuses of all of these when we have our meeting in May. And other than that, I can answer any questions. Staff's here. If you got questions I can't answer, that's all I have.
Okay, any questions?
No, I think this is really, really helpful, particularly as we go into looking again at the budgets, and also as we think about considering in the capital improvements which things are already locked in, which things might we reconsider. I think some of the capital improvements specific capital improvements that you're gonna go over in May, correct? Some of them came from, the previous council that many of us were not on, so that's something that I'll be interested in May.
But I will say this, not that I wouldn't approach that you're necessarily throwing good money after bad or something like that. I have seen, and also having come in as the cleanup guy, like 3 times, different places, you will have projects that were set by prior councils that are, they may be a great project, they may be a mediocre project, but even on some that have, let's say it's a 51% benefit rather than a 90% benefit. You need to think about also, you've had maybe sunk cost in there. And sometimes you run across a project that is truly not, you can't justify it. I don't think anything that staff is working on right now, I think from the engineering side, would say anything that they're working on actively was just a bad idea. Why are we doing this? And I think we would be raising the red flag right now if we had any projects that we would say, look, this has zero benefit. We don't know why we're working on this. You will hear that from us at some point. If we run across something, or if we were in design and said this doesn't make any sense, we'd be the first ones to raise that flag.
So in December, we had a discussion about, our financial needs and what might play out. We might not have the funds to do some of those capital improvements. And so that's really where my question is coming from. If we might not have the funds for some of these capital improvements, which ones, what will happen? So I'm sure you'll.
Yeah, like I said, it's a 5-year
Mike's
program,
coming,
but we
yeah.
do have a column at the end of 5 years for future
Right.
consideration projects.
It was like a 10-year.
And everything in
thing.
that column is basically projects we don't have funding identified for yet.
That's correct, so.
And I'll add to Todd's explanation. If you look at the general fund, one of the notes we made here was 77% of total cost all years. Projects we've identified, previous projects that have basically been sourced within the general fund, majority of them have been pushed out to future years because we have so many constraints on the general fund. We listed drainage here because we've wanted to set aside $1 million a year because there are so many drainage needs. What we've ended up doing just in the last couple of years is pivoting to seeking those federal and state grant funds. There's so many of them to try and make up that ground. And the other note you'll see here under the special grant fund is we have at least those 4. Community project funding, that's a federal grant, Texas CDBG, Texas General Land Office, 3 different grant opportunities. All 3 of those are focused on drainage so that we can reduce the burden, any potential burden we might put on the general fund for drainage improvement. So in a way that there's a lot of fluidity within the capital improvement program. Every year we approve a new list of projects and we assign dollar amounts to those, but many of those are estimates, and that can change depending on things we see on the ground, how projects evolve over time, and then different councils may change their priorities and adjust those list of projects from time to time. So it's very fluid. We try to keep it within the scope of these individual funds here. And typically these conversations narrow down over the weeks and months as council begins to focus on the next budget cycle.
Any other questions or comments? We don't need
Thank you, Todd.
we don't
Very
need a
helpful.
motion for this. Okay, that concludes our regular meeting. We will now adjourn into executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.087 and 551.071. We will adjourn and be back shortly. Thank you very much. We're returning from executive session at 8:05 pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.087 and 551.071. No action taken. This concludes our meeting. God bless the great city of Nacogdoches, Texas.